So due diligence is very important, especially in that specific aspect. We look at the all-free documents and all of that, and we try to look at the scope of works and see if there's anything that is out of scope, or if we can help them reduce costs, and if there's anything unusual in the offer that we can help pinpoint.
Hi, I'm Toby from Blake Clough Consulting, and I'm here with Siddharth and Chanel today to talk a little bit about the Clean Power 2030 process, the ongoing grid reform, which is a process that's been drawn out for a little while now that Blake Clough have been working closely on, and also to talk about how Blake Clough have helped developers up until now and how we plan to help the developers going forwards as much as we can, as well as engaging with the system operators. Lots of developers that we work with have got a project that's in principle ready to go, and they're just limited by the grid and by the Gate 2 process. Perhaps they were less advanced in the planning process than maybe they needed to be. How much scope is there for projects to appeal their Gate 2 outcomes, or what opportunities might exist going forwards for circumventing the readiness criteria?
Yeah, I think appeals, from our understanding, is slightly harder to do on the arguments of strategic alignment or readiness criteria. I think in general, if developers feel that NISO haven't obliged to the kind of rules set out as per the CNDM or as per the code and they breach the license, then they can take it up on that kind of an appeal route. Mm-hmm. But in terms of challenging the strategic alignment, that's something that from the initial publications from Ofgem, that's indicated that that's not a very viable, or like it's not going to be entertained by Ofgem or NISO essentially. Yeah. So I think the main opportunities there are understanding if you can maybe repurpose your project in some way, as Chanel was saying, behind the meter solutions, power to X solutions, or like non-grid approaches towards energizing. That could be a quicker, or like a slightly separate and quicker route towards connecting your project and creating revenue.
Yeah, I mean, there's also the project designation process. We don't know much about this, but I can talk a little bit about what we've seen so far. So NISO have announced that they do expect to see some projects or some regions of the country where they'll identify a grid constraint or a requirement that might need an extra type of generation or flexibility. And so we expect some battery projects, transmission connected battery projects, could serve this process well, where NISO will identify a constraint or an area of the transmission network that requires flexibility or new generation, and developers can demonstrate to NISO their project's suitability to be designated, which means they will be able to, I don't know exactly the kind of like the code phrasing of this, but they'll be able to not be required to show their readiness and instead prove their kind of values to project designation. And so one of the things that we're kind of preemptively hoping may happen is that NISO announced this designation in a certain area of the country. We're expecting it may be in the Scottish borders or inside East Anglia. And we want to enable projects to demonstrate to NISO how they kind of provide this benefit to consumers, the net benefit to consumers. And I think that's part of NISO's license obligation is to kind of reduce the cost to consumers. But that's kind of an unknown element at the moment. We're still waiting to see if NISO identify that designation requirement anywhere in the country. So will be interesting to see. So we were talking earlier about Gate 2 offers and the due diligence services that Blake Clough will be able to do on them, and we expect to be working on lots of Gate 2 offers within the coming months. What are the main aspects of our Gate 2 due diligence reports, and how will it help developers in the short window that they have to decide whether they want to accept their Gate 2 offer?
So due diligence is very important, especially in that specific aspect. we look at the offer documents and all of that, and we try to look at the scope of works and see if there's anything that is out of scope, or if we can help them reduce costs, and if there's anything unusual in the offer that we can help pinpoint. And we also look at non-firm arrangement, which goes hand in hand with a non-firm gate to connection under a technical scheme limit. Or do you have anything to add, Siddharth?
Yeah, I think it's like with Gate 2 offers coming out, obviously like the scope of that connections queue has now changed to what it was previously evaluated as. So as Chanel was saying, like there could be opportunities, there could also be risks associated for your projects, with reinforcements being added or dropping away, or with costs increasing. And essentially we do a review, like a thorough review of the documents. We look at your charging statements. We try to assess whether things are sensible. We advise you on whether you should take the fixed liabilities route or the actual liabilities route. And we also look at other like fault level issues that could happen at your GSP, flag those to you, and just evaluate the general reinforcement works that are preventing you from energizing or that you're placed behind.
Right.
So it's like it's a very comprehensive way of telling you that your offer, does it look good? What are the key risks to you energizing? What could be key risks to you energizing in the future if certain transmission reinforcement works have been identified to have potential options for delay, for example? And maybe what opportunities are there for you to maybe like potentially, as Chanel was saying, connect earlier on a non-firm basis.
Sounds like it's definitely worth it for the relative costs compared to the whole project cost of these Gate 2 offer reviews. That's a really important piece of work we'll be doing.
Yeah, especially given that there's such short timelines for offer acceptance. So it's always good to have a third party look at it and kind of just supplement your own understanding of the connection offer. And we have a lot of resources within Blake Club. We've been doing DDs for a very long time now. And we can undertake, like if you have a massive portfolio as well, we can parallelize our resources to kind of allow you to respond to that connection offer within the required time frame.
Yeah.
And it's very common to see developers asking for a CP2030 review and a due diligence, because they're very complementary.
Yeah, and I can imagine, as Siddharth said, for developers who are expecting to receive over 5, maybe 10, 20 Gate 2 offers within a short window, doing all of that due diligence and analysis in-house for them is an incredibly large piece of work. So it kind of makes sense for people like us who've seen it all before to take a look.
Yeah. And just building on like Chanel's point of the CP2030 and DD going hand in hand, it's also important from the perspective of project acquisition. So whether you're a buyer or like, particularly if you're a buyer, obviously the connection offer is important, but also now understanding how that slots in, your connection offer slots in with the connections reform, and how that has implications towards your project operating in terms of maybe you've lost a best element now going into the reforms, or what opportunities there are to accelerate your connection if you are looking to energize earlier or looking to have some of your portfolio energized earlier. So it's a really good in-hand complementary service that we offer.
Yes, and if we have many projects, especially for buyers that are looking to buy projects, we look at the portfolio and we rank the projects depending on their attractiveness and all of that to help them get an idea of what they should be prioritizing.
We know that through the Gate 2 process, we do expect some projects' point of connection to change, and also after the connections process, there's new transmission substations that will be established, that existing connection offers will be moved to these new substations. Do you want to lay out a bit the scenarios under which a project's point of connection may be moved, and maybe what it might mean for the developers? Can it be a good thing, or is it almost always a bad thing for their connection date, things like that?
Yeah, I think one scenario is that previously they might have been having to cable in like 5 kilometers and connect into a substation, but following reforms or following Gate 1 attrition from connections reform, there could be capacity freed up at an overhead line that's like running a few hundred meters away from their project site. So now there's opportunities for them to like tee off or loop into that OHL line rather than cabling all the way to the substation, and that could provide significant savings in terms of costs. As well as like timescales, because you have shorter cable lengths associated, for example. So those are some opportunities. Those are some situations where we see that your point of connection could potentially improve. The same goes with like maybe you're triggering a new GSP because there wasn't enough physical bays available at the substation. You're connecting at 132 kV, for example, in England and Wales. Now with projects dropping away at that GSP who are also connecting at 132 kV, you could potentially connect into the previous GSP rather than triggering a new GSP. So that's another scenario that could happen. And in general, just because of thermal headroom freed up at your original GSP, or because of fault level headroom freed up at your original GSP, you now no longer trigger a new GSP and you can revert back to your original GSP. So those are some of the kind of like scenarios that could allow you to energize faster and also provide you opportunities to energize on a non-firm basis faster. In terms of like triggering a new GSP, we do like our impact assessments do kind of try to understand where you lie at those substation, like at those local substation queues, and whether you fall within materiality trigger limits or you fall outside of those, and whether those new GSPs would still be triggered or not that you were previously triggering. So that's a way that we analyze it.
Is it impossible for a project that has a connection offer at an individual GSP to suddenly be moved to one of the new GSPs, or is there a route for projects who have a connection offer at substation X to be moved to a new substation that doesn't yet exist?
So in terms of projects having like risks to projects being shifted to a new substation, the main kind of scenarios where I think that could happen is if you're like a planning submitted or land rights project aligned with phase 2, and what has happened is that you've been leapfrogged at your local substation by planning consented projects within phase 2. And essentially now you're breaching the trigger point at that substation, and you're kind of exceeding the thermal capacity, or you're exceeding the fault level headroom available at that substation. And resultingly, you're now having to move to a new GSP. So all of this is like we kind of, when we do the CP2030 detailed impact assessment, we look at all of this and we highlight those risks to you depending on your planning status that went through CMP435, as well as what the planning status of other projects in the queue were that went through connections reform.
Blake Clough are also doing feasibilities for the construction of new plants, either generation or demand. We spoke a bit about this at the start, but for a specific look at it, just wanted to ask how our feasibility product is linked to the Clean Power 2030 connections reform, and why it's become especially valuable now that we have such a good insight on what the results of the reform will be.
Yeah, I think the really valuable part is that we have our in-house CP2030 queue. So like NESO's published this aggregated zonal data where you can tell, okay, on a zonal basis, this is the capacity of gate 2 projects. But to kind of link that back to individual projects, that's a task that we've done. So at a particular substation, if you're looking to apply, like maybe you have a parcel of land in like Anglesey, for example, and you're trying to apply to a substation over there, we can use those queues to infer or like to kind of model what's dropping out at those queues and the kind of thermal capacity that attrition is going to free up at those local substation or at those OHLs or at those different circuits essentially, and advise you as to what the best point of connection for your project site should be.
So we're doing a spatial disaggregation almost of NESO's results.
Yeah.
That's really valuable.
To add on the feasibility part, we also help out with feasibilities for data centers. And recently, we've been, obviously they have slightly different requirements where they typically need double circuits to connect. And they're looking for firm headroom. It's not non-firm headroom that they need at the substation. We model best attrition at those substations to account for like a pre-CMP435 and post-CMP435 view of capacity available. We also have been incorporating other data center related features such as the kind of dark fiber availability in the region, the availability of water sources to support those data centers, as well as the general outlook of planning councils within the region. So it gives you a more holistic view of the site from not just a grid perspective, but also a general planning and development perspective when you're looking to build out new data center projects.
Okay, that brings us to the end of the discussion. Thanks, Chanel and Siddharth, for your contributions. If anything that we discussed today interests you or you want to find out more, please get in touch with either one of the panel or our info address email available on the website, and we'll be happy to help.